Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Houston, Texas, deputy on duty and her daughter killed by a driver who's reported to be drunk. This is a little bit off our normal track, but I'm an advocate for always driving sober. This is a sad story. It's an excellent example of why it is so important. At 3 a.m., 46-year-old Catherine Hudson, an 18-year Harris County sheriff, was working an extra job providing security for a construction crew. In the car with her was her 7-year-old daughter, Casey. They never made it home as Omar Jose Alvarado, 23, crashed into their car and the vehicles burst into flames. He is charged with 2 counts of intoxication manslaughter. I was concerned about what penalty might apply. In Texas, this is punished by 2 to 20 years. However, if a peace officer was involved or 2 or more people, the penalties can be for a first-degree felony. As both apply here, I recommend the death penalty if found guilty, and if that cannot be applied, to be sentenced to life in prison without parole. People listening to this show are aware of my prior exhortations to never drive while impaired. There are so many options: taxis, Ubers, Lyfts, and just sleeping it off in your car. It is especially important as we approach this big holiday season. Today's show is dedicated to the memory of Deputy Hudson and her daughter, Casey. Quick mention here that Jack Smith did the totally expected and has dismissed the federal lawfare cases against Trump in D.C. in the appeal of his loss in the Florida documents case. Now, either the Fed courts need to slap the New York courts, or the New York courts need to get some sanity and do the same with even the more ridiculous state causes that have been pending. More cabinet picks with Dr. Dave's commentary. The heat got too much for Matt Gaetz, who withdrew from consideration for Attorney General late last week. It is unclear at this time if he will reclaim his seat in Congress. Remember, he still holds it. This is a good move for him and Trump. In a bit of a surprise, President-elect Trump almost immediately nominated former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi to be U.S. Attorney General. Bondi is an excellent choice. This puts another woman in the Trump cabinet, contrary to the nonsense about its administration not being supportive of smart, tough women. I expect that she'll do an even better job than Gaetz and will likely be more easily confirmed. With the heat off Gaetz, the media has jumped on Pete Hegseth, presently of Fox News. I've already expressed my support for him. Let's see how it goes. As Treasury Secretary, in a bit of a surprise to me, Trump announced Scott Bessent. I say surprised because he used to be the money manager for Trump's archenemy, Soros. He's a hardcore advocate for deficit reduction. That puts him high on my list. He would also be the first openly gay member of a president's cabinet if confirmed. This is also interesting, as another person who you would expect to align with the Dems have come over to the GOP cause. Parallel to this, Trump has picked Howard Lutnick, a longtime friend and chief executive of the financial services firm Cantor Fitzgerald, as his nominee for Commerce Secretary. He could also have been nominated for that Treasury slot. His special claim to fame is following 9/11, where Cantor Fitzgerald firm lost 658 employees in one terrorist attack. He rebuilt the whole firm. If you're going to send someone in to take on a tough job, he would be the person. His nomination is likely to be an easy confirmation, and I think that's a good move. Trump has announced the nomination of Linda McMahon as head of the Department of Education. She was the head of the U.S. Small Business Administration during Trump's first term. Her last name may be familiar to some, I'm told, because of her tie to wrestling. As I do not watch anything like that, I'll have to take somebody else's word for it. Because of the buzz about killing off the Department of Education, this position will get a lot of scrutiny. McMahon does not appear to have any formal background in the field of education. However, if Trump's real intention is to reduce government, having a business person in charge may help. The DOE is a badly flawed operation. As a professional educator, I would favor shutting it down and reallocating some of the pieces to other agencies and dumping the rest. The federal student loan program is buried in there somewhere and could be converted to another department like Treasury. State and local governments can handle relevant educational standards for the students. Let's keep those tax dollars at the local level and not send them to Washington, where they're cut into pieces and then bits and pieces are sent back out to the states. The fact that the Communist Teachers Union, which I hold directly responsible for the failure of the U.S. K through 12 failures, already are complaining about her appointment, and that tells me that Trump may have nominated the right person. Now, a note of concern. Trump has chosen Dr. Jeanette Nischwet to serve as Surgeon General. However, conservative news sites report that she is along the lines of Tony Fauci with regard to the government's failed response to the pandemic. More critically, she's praised censorship of dissident voices on the topic of vaccines and other responses to the pandemic. I am not against vaccines, but I want the truth, and the truth comes out from hearing all voices. To arrest governors who get in the way of Tom Homan. One of Trump's first appointments was Tom Homan for head of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE. He returns to this position, which he held in the Trump's first administration. His record of success in closing the border and enforcing the Remain in Mexico policy is well known. Some moron Democrat governors have openly called for resistance to deportations. This includes Maura Healey of Massachusetts, Gavin Newsom of California, and J.B. Pritzker of Illinois. The resistance would most likely be a federal crime, and I call on the new DOJ to enforce the applicable laws. It is odd that they are voicing resistance, as this is the first approach of Homan is to remove 300,000 convicted criminals. How are these idiots helping the people of their states? Would it not be better to have fewer criminals in your states? Homan is also looking for 300,000 missing children as a result of the badly botched Biden-Harris border. If you see a folded dollar bill on the ground, do not pick it up. This one was prompted by a report by Dave Basner citing a 2023 post on Facebook by Lane County, Kansas Sheriff's Department. Quote, earlier this afternoon, a citizen contacted the on-duty deputy to report they had found a folded $1 bill in their yard. Upon unfolding it, a white substance spilled out. The post goes on to say that the bill was tested for drugs. It tested positive for methamphetamines, but negative for fentanyl and opiates. The Lane County Sheriff's Office says it's common for drug users and dealers to transport drugs in folded money or paper, and it can be exceptionally hazardous if the drug is fentanyl or something like that. It is important to remain vigilant about potential hazards in your surroundings. Hey, it used to be that finding money was a good thing. Can Trump end Ukraine's endless war? I cite a recent article with this title by the famed author and commentator Victor Davis Hanson. Now that the election is over, a major question is whether Trump can actually end the Ukraine war. While the GOP has historically been the hardcore anti-communism party, they have been very concerned about the amount of cash dumped into Ukraine. Given the long-term corruption in that country, a specific concern is how much is actually helping the country versus the amount of graft. Hansen describes the war as the greatest European killing field since World War II, the cauldron on the Ukrainian border that has likely already cost 1 to 1.5 million combined dead, wounded, and missing Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, along with civilians. As most know, Biden giving Ukraine permission to use American long-range missiles to strike deep into Russia may increase the likelihood of a bigger war, or at least a much more dangerous one. Hansen opines that cutting off all aid to Ukraine now would seal the fate of the country. So likely that Trump would threaten to continue aid to Ukraine that is costing Russia so much in lost soldiers and money. Faced with that, an approach might be to establish a DMZ between Russia and Ukraine's borders and ensure European Union economic aid for a fully armed Ukraine that might deter an endlessly restless Russian neighbor. Zelensky could boast that despite slow help from the US, Russia did not take the majority of the country and caused huge losses for Russia at the same time. The implied deal would most likely include a deal that Ukraine would not join NATO. I personally oppose any deal that allows that murderer, Putin, to dictate to a sovereign country. And I hope that Ukraine will indeed join NATO at some point. New Oregon law, a threat to sensibility. In a sad commentary on the deranged leftist model, Oregon has a law to go into effect on January 1, which forces health insurers authorized in the state to cover transgenital surgeries and hormones for children, or risk losing their insurance licenses. Oregon's new rule also requires insurers to, get this, contract with enough gender doctors to prevent long wait lines. As with my prior disclaimers, I'm not opposed to adults with proper counseling deciding to have gender reassignment surgery. However, I also note that unhappy people who think they'll be happier as the other gender are usually still unhappy. Those are the statistics, folks. That's not just my opinion. But I go ballistic when children who are still finding their way are mutilated. In many cases, these surgeries are not reversible. This bizarre rule from Oregon's Department of Consumer and Business Services relies on the latest standards of care developed, get this group, World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This clown show operation refers to this treatment as medically necessary to justify expanding insurance coverage. Given the poor track record for adults, I do not support any insurance coverage for patients at any age. If some adults want to try this out, use their own money. Remember, health insurance is a shared expense model. If this money is spent by the insurance companies, everyone with health insurance will be paying for it. Whistleblower warns that the FBI can't be trusted with background checks for Trump's nominees. An article in the Washington Times raises yet another concern for Trump. An unidentified whistleblower inside the FBI has advised the House Judiciary Committee that the Bureau's Security Clearance Division, SecD, is politicized. Under Deputy Director Abate and Director Wray, it cannot be trusted to screen President-elect Donald Trump's nominees for top administration jobs. Part of the detail is that even though Wray was appointed director by Trump during his first administration, obviously there are mega problems in the FBI. In fact, I anticipate that Wray will be replaced nearly immediately by Trump. However, that's later. What about right now? The report by the whistleblower cited as saying, quote, under Wray, SecD refused clearances to U.S. military veterans, employees who refused to get COVID shots, employees who attended Trump rallies, and employees with conservative Christian beliefs. Continuing, the same FBI officials will be adjudicating President Trump's nominees. Deputy Director Abate and Director Wray will have unfettered access to any information that President Trump's appointees provide during their security clearance background investigations. The disclosures could also be said that the FBI could use anything from the background checks to lead information to state officials for potential prosecutions. Hopefully these people don't have any skeletons hiding in their closets, but I find it as an interesting observation. Our series of interviews for Saving America establishes that the world is full of interesting people. Once you hear from our next guest, I am sure you will agree that she deserves the moniker of an interesting person. Saving America welcomes Nita Kohli. She started off with BSc with honors in math and management at King's College London. Along the way, she earned an executive leadership certificate at Tuck Smith, her NACD directorship certification. She is part of the Institute of Chartered Accountants in England and Wales and has her FINRA Series 99 license. Her professional career has included international roles with KPMG in the UK, Deutsche Bank, 15 years at JP Morgan, and guided Freddie Mac through the pandemic and navigating multiple crises over the past decade. She's most recently served as the global head of enterprise resilience at Citi, driving a transformative shift to fortify safety and stability while reducing risk. She's currently serving on the executive advisory board of several fintech companies and lending her expertise as a strategic advisor to risk management companies. Nita's exceptional leadership garnered her recognition as a finalist for the 2021 Excellent in Leadership Women's Housing Award and the Program Leader Excellence Award for the Disaster Recovery International Institute in 2022. Nita was honored as one of the top 50 outstanding Asian Americans in 2022. Nita recently authored a book, Operational Resilience. We had to shorten her bio so we would have time for the interview itself. We welcome Nita Kohli for her first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, David, for the introduction.
And we had a great time talking before we started recording here. It's so great to meet you. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions. And the first one, as an advocate for diversity and gender equality, you spearheaded the Men as Allies program at JP Morgan. Tell our audience about that program and what else you've been doing to advance women's careers in the finance industry.
So it's a great question, and it's a topic that I'm very, very passionate about. Maybe if I sort of go back a bit in time and give you some of the tenets of my passion, I think that would sort of give a bit more insight. So I grew up in the UK in an era where there was a lot of, there was a lot of racism. I grew up in a predominantly non-Indian society. And as you progress through school and academia, things become abundantly clear that there's an element of privilege that that you're not aware of. I started becoming more aware of diversity and some of the how quickly or lack of career progression there was in certain, in corporate UK, corporate America. And as I progressed and got more senior through my career, I realized that gender or diversity and the advancement of women over the last 20, 30 years has been slow, very slow. So so when I think about some of the work I've done, I've been actively in my careers in corporate, been pursuing roles to advance women or be a global diversity lead. And I think one of the key things that I come to is there's an element of diversity of thought. And it's that's key, that really helps organization really advance and grow. And actually it's been proven to improve the bottom line. So very specifically, while my tenure at JP, we initiated a program called Men as Allies, because it's known that most of the C-suite and the board seat members, dare I say, were white males. And they are actually the strongest advocates for advancing and helping women progress through organizations. So we initiated a program of some of the 10 most senior below our CEO at that, well, Jamie's still CEO, to really pull the level of advocacy that we needed and the championship to really support women through their careers. It didn't necessarily mean that every woman was promoted, but having a sponsor, a mentor, or a champion in one's career at whatever level is a huge benefit as you're navigating your way through a very complex organizational matrix organization. And that program was initiated in the US, rolled out across our regions through EMEA, LATAM, and South America as well. And it brought together a level of collaboration and camaraderie across the organization, where the designated males that we had as allies, we were getting abundance of mails saying, please sign me up. The point was, it was really, they were more advocates to help women progress through the organization. It wasn't going to happen overnight, and it needs to happen with intent and purpose. You see today, I left JP now 5+ years ago, but you can see the advancements they've made in promoting women. Obviously, you see the C-suite leadership. I'm not saying that was due to this program, but you see a lot more women being able to progress. There's a lot more transparency. And this was in complement to other programs that were being led across the organization. But this Men as Allies was a pure recognition, top down, that, men need to help us champion women and give opportunities to women as they advance their careers. And what we wanted to be very careful with, David, is not creating a level of diversity across the organization. So there had to be a right balance, recognizing there were gaps with the level of senior women in leadership positions, because you've seen the stats. I think they're pretty common across industry, that there's a middle layer that women get not trapped in, but start falling off the radar as they start progressing to more senior leadership positions. So really recognizing that. So it needs to be multifaceted. It can't just be top down at certain levels. So it's in complement to other programs that existed. So that really was the start. And I think as I progressed through beyond then, it's really giving women the opportunities and connecting them and helping them, helping them through their careers, whether it's a mentor, forging a connection for them. Because I think it's very important, for not saying like women just helping women, but recognizing that there is a gap when you look at the most senior positions. You look across boards. Now I see that at the corporate board programs, and how we foster that awareness and openness to change, because there is a level of, sometimes resistance to change, let's be honest, right? You don't want people necessarily rocking the boat, but I think it's very important to say it's not race, it's not gender, it's not sexual orientation, it's really the thinking, the experience that you can contribute to the organization, to the institution. That is where there is business value and benefit. So having that recognition is not about the color of someone or the sex of someone. Just recognize that they bring in a diverse opinion that could really help advance your organization. And that's really my core tenets as I think about diversity and how I look at it.
Absolutely. Very inspiring. So you've had some wonderful corporate roles. Which one do you feel was your crowning achievement to date, and why is that?
I suppose our memories don't go back that long, but I would say in the last 5 years, I mean, you mentioned it as you introduced me. I'll say two things. I think some of the best roles I've had are the ones I had not planned for and I thought were the most difficult. So coming out of the financial crisis, at one point when I was at JP leading resolution planning for the investment bank, very difficult, but I reflect on that and think that was one of the most opportune career moves I made, because it actually gave me a full spectrum of knowledge and understanding how the organization works. But I think more recently, one of the positions I really enjoyed and I felt very passionate about was at Freddie Mac. I literally joined Freddie Mac back end of 19, the infamous time frame. And then 2 months later, I was thrust into leading the organization together with my leadership through the pandemic. And being sort of under government conservative and charters, you're not necessarily part of the same industry groups as some of the banks or the other financial services are, but being able to create that collaboration broadly within the institute and really been helping to help an organization go through uncharted territory, sort of forging the connections with peer institutions, with vendors, with suppliers, just to understand how people were thinking about it. And, it was very fundamental, staying in touch with the health. You saw Dr. Fauci's constant updates, and we had to keep aware of state legislation and, county legislation, who was open, who wasn't. So it sort of brought together many different aspects of how we do business. And I think it was quite fortuitous going into an organization, going into this role before I knew leading sort of crisis management and resilience, that it actually brought that to the forefront of conversations. And it helped us really facilitate an advancement in our agenda that otherwise may have not happened as rapidly. So it was an enabler. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say the leadership at that time at Freddie were very visionary and you have the support, right? And that means everything, even as a leader and you're not at the top of the pyramid, having the support and the resources that you need to really help an organization fare through some of these unpredicted events is foundational to the success, right, of an organization. Right through that. So
absolutely. You got to have that team working together. And you sound to me like the inspiring team leader that a lot of people need out in this world. And to close, you have a new book called Operational Resilience. Please share with our audience what this book's about and who's going to benefit from reading it.
So it's really targeted towards leaders and I would say some practitioners, but there's three things I really that sort of really drove me to write this book. One is really, I think there's been a bit of complacency around resilience. It sort of comes to light whenever we have a crisis, whether it's a CrowdStrike, there's geopolitical threats going on, wars. When something becomes near to our territory, then it becomes sort of the next hot topic. I really want to change that mindset shift to really think about how it can really help an organization advance growth and drive business value. And what I mean by that is really, when you think about, and I have to use parallels, right, with the banking industry, a retail bank, if you've got a retail bank that's available and are available 24/7, you're more likely to bank with them, right? Because there's sort of sustainability with that bank. It's open all the time you need it. What does that do? It builds market share, it builds customer brand, it builds loyalty. That improves the bottom line. So sort of thinking about resilience from the lens of how it's really helping drive business value and growth. Also, that's something, the stakeholders, the boards and your investors are looking for. What are you doing? How resilient are you? So really sort of trying to change the narrative on that. I'm also really I take the book, I try and simplify a lot of the complexities. It's a very complex world that we live in. So getting behind the regulations, often that sometimes when these regulations, and obviously the financial industry, many of you know, is highly regulated, and people look at that as a sort of the beacon, right? I know healthcare and others follow, but again, you have to get behind the regulations. If the regulation says tie your shoelaces left to right, people tie them left to right rather than thinking they're asking us to tie our shoelaces. Why? Is it to keep your shoe in the foot? Just really understanding the intent and purpose. I use that as a very simple analogy because I think sometimes that gets lost in translation. And then you may find the way you approach, the way you solution or build to that regulation or comply with it may be different. You may be able to simplify, you may be able to connect a few other things together that are going on across the organization. So the third point I make is, after getting behind the regulations, is understanding how globally connected we are. The pandemic was a great example of that. And it's not just because I've grown up in finance, it's a book targeted to the financial service industry. It's actually targeted with, I use examples from manufacturing, from transportation, primarily because we're a globally connected ecosystem. We really need to understand the value chain or the supply chain. It's an integral part of how we operate and how resilient we are. You think about sort of, financial services. We all know that we have dependencies on some countries in Asia. What does that do if you need to sort of advance your software and your hardware capabilities? It has a direct impact to your organization. So really understanding more of that value chain outside your industry, so you can really put some guardrails against the things that you can control and the things that you really can't, but you're aware of, helps you manage the risk within your organization much more comprehensively than looking at things in isolation, which may result in very different decisions and strategic objectives. Right.
Sounds like a must read for a lot of people. So how can our audience get more information about you, your new book, and your other outreach activities?
So please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I think that's the best way. My book has been published, and I will give a shout out to the publishers, Risk.net. They've been fabulous all the way through. I think of them as a partner. Can also get the book through them. And they are offering a discount for a period, given that it's only just been released. But I'm happy to connect. And even if there is an opportunity there, you would like some advisory within your firm to help establish some of these frameworks, or just have a discussion to increase awareness, please reach out. I'm open, and I look forward to the conversation, because I think it's awareness and convergence in the narrative is foundational in how we address and how we move forward as an economy, as a globe, as an industry, as a country.
Nita Kohli, it has been fabulous to have you as a guest on Saving America. We need to take a break, but more craziness from the politics and business world when we get back. Welcome back to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade, and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. In a ruling that's attracted quite a bit of attention, the Supreme Court has ruled 6-3 against a rule that banned bump stocks, which reportedly turned semi-automatic rifles into machine guns. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote the decision, and quote, "Semi-automatic firearms, which require shooters to re-engage the trigger for every shot, are not machine guns. This case asks whether a bump stock, an accessory for a semi-automatic rifle that allows the shooter to rapidly re-engage the trigger and therefore achieve a high rate of fire, converts the rifle into a machine gun. We hold that it does not. This reversed a ruling during the Trump presidency against bump stocks by the Federal Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, also more commonly known as ATF. Since both political parties favored the restriction on bump stocks, this case has taken a very high profile. Recall that the term bump stock became notorious when a shooter in a high hotel room in Las Vegas killed 58 and wounded more than 850 persons at an outdoor concert on the Vegas Strip. He fired more than 1,000 rounds in an 11-minute shooting spree. The justices in the majority noted that Congress does have the authority to designate the bump stock as converting a weapon to nearly a machine gun. What the court's ruling does is distinguishes the power of an agency versus the Congress. Unfortunately, this ruling has been used to criticize the conservative majority on the high court. However, it is consistent with other administrative law rulings, like the recent one regarding the abortion pill, which is the subject of a different episode of ours. A recent U.S. Supreme Court decision dealt a major blow to the current administrative bureaucracy. In this case, George Doreski was prosecuted by the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, for allegedly committing securities fraud. Per the normal administrative rules, federal agencies like the SEC create the regulations, enforce the regulations, and then even adjudicate cases where the accused does not agree with the agency's enforcement action. Most cases are heard by ALJs, also called administrative law judges, who are on the federal payroll. They agree over 90% of the time with the agencies for which they act. Jareski filed suit claiming his Seventh Amendment right to a jury trial. Typical of most SCOTUS cases, it took him 10 years for him to finally get his day in court before the Supreme Court. The Seventh Amendment guarantees a right to jury trial in all suits at common law. Fraud would be included, so Jareski said he should therefore get a jury. Interesting response. The Fed said that the Seventh Amendment does not apply when the government enforces a public right, a right enforced by the administrative state, such as in this case. Jareski's counsel replied, however, that in such an expansive reading would result in most cases being denied protection of the courts. The SCOTUS 6-3 majority reached back into the history of the Constitution to respond that due to the persecution of the population by the English prior to the Revolution, the jury system was designed to provide consistent judgment versus the domination of the population by the government and its army. And as noted above, the ALJs are on the agency's payroll and tend to overwhelmingly support the agency determinations. The court also ruled that certain cases might fit the administrative path, such as taxes, immigration, and certain public benefits. Fraud is a pretty common matter, folks, and it existed before the administrative state. In a decision that some consider controversial, the U.S. Supreme Court rules 8-1 to support law banning guns for people under domestic abuse restraining orders. The case involves Zaki Rami of Texas. He was involved in an incredible 5 shooting incidents near Arlington, Texas, within 1 month. Prior to this series of shootings, he'd been placed under a violence protective order after he was accused of assaulting his girlfriend. Therefore, Rahimi was charged by a federal grand jury for possession of a firearm while under domestic violence protective order. So pursuant to a 1994 federal law, he was ordered to no longer have possession of firearms. Folks, this sounds pretty basic to me. In 2022, the Supreme Court ruled in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Broom that the public had a Second Amendment right to bear arms in public for self-defense. Therefore, any restrictions on guns must be deeply rooted in American history if they are to survive constitutional scrutiny. So Rahimi bought a new action after the Supreme Court ruled. So he's already been told he can't have firearms. He hears about this case, and he goes back to court, and the Solicitor General of the U.S. opposed his case. He even won through the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which rather surprised me. However, the Supreme Court agreed with the U.S. Solicitor. She argued that there is strong historical evidence supporting the general principle that the government may disarm dangerous individuals. There is a saying that hard cases make bad law. However, given what Rahimi did previously, it is hard to disagree with this decision. Further, when there's so much gun violence in America, and much of it is due to family fights and domestic abuse, seems like taking steps to protect certain individuals in the public is certainly in order. And we welcome a high visibility podcaster and a published author, Joseph M. Leonard. Mr. Leonard is also known as Joe Leonard Detroit. He is an author, blogger, cancer survivor, constitutionalist, former IT professional, podcaster, political activist, social media influencer, and speaker. He is also the author of Terror Strikes, Coming Soon to a City Near You, a #1 Amazon bestseller, and How to Write a Book and Get It Published. He is the host of the Constitutionalist Politics podcast. He describes himself as born of the 1960s, very much a person of the 1980s. We welcome Joseph M. Leonard for his first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you, David. And if we're relying on Joseph M. Leonard to save America. We're all in trouble.
Well, you and I have talked before, so I know you've got a lot of good ideas. As you know, we follow a 3-question format. And the first question, you make a point of saying you are a lifelong resident of Wyandotte, Michigan, adding by choice. Tell us a little bit about that. It's just, I've just caught my attention.
Yeah, my way of starting off kind of the bio aspect. And to be clear, yes, I am Joseph M. Leonard. It looks like French. It's not Leonard. It's actually Polish. It was probably Leonard Waskowicz at some point, but it's Leonard without an O. And I got to throw that middle initial in there because there is an author out of South Carolina, Joseph Leonard. So I've got to make sure I make that spelling distinction and name distinction. But yeah, born and raised in Southeast Michigan, a southern suburb of Detroit. I'm not fond of the winters, of course, but 4 seasons are nice, and by choice, I pretty much choose to stay here, family, friends, and all that. Yeah, I love the Vegas area. I'd love to move to Vegas, but no, by choice, I do stay in the southeastern Michigan area. I was born one city over, basically spent 99.99999% of my life in Wyandotte, and yeah, I'm happy with that. I like our city. It's nice.
Well, we used to have an acronym, BMOC, Big Man on Campus. And I'm guessing that when you're in a smaller town, in contrast to where I am in Houston, Texas, which is a area of about 4 million people, give or take 500,000 or so, it's a lot harder to be the BMOC, right?
That's true. You're like, you want to be a big fish in a small pond, or just one of the minnows in the big lake, right?
Absolutely. Switching to a little bit more serious topic, your book, Constitutionalist Politics, and you have it trademarked. Tell our audience about this unique trademark word and the point of your podcast.
Yeah, I felt called to do more than I've been doing. And I thought, well, I could start a low-key, kind of low-cost podcast, as is my 4th international book is called Podcasting Quick Start Guide. So I could teach you how to do it too. Right? I could teach, by you, I mean anyone out there. You could start a low-key, low-cost, low-scale kind of podcast and see what happens and go with it. I'm in my 2nd season now, but I felt called to do more than what I was. I'm older now. I have health issues, older, slower, poorer. So I have to do more from my couch these days than as a political activist my whole life could do before, driving a lot of places, going a lot of places, speaking a lot of places. So now I sit my butt on my couch and reach people through the internet. But conservative, whether people either really gravitate or want to run from that word. So I thought I need a new approach. Constitutionalist, Christian-based U.S. constitutionalism, right? Reach some of those who may be a little left of center Christians, but we can still talk with one another, even though I am a right of center Christian, together based in the root of the Bible, things that we can come together and agree on. And that's the point and the meaning of my show. Like, it's not, I was born and raised Catholic, right? My grandfather was Lutheran, became Catholic to marry my grandmother on my mother's side, Josephine. But I like to say it's not a Catholic show. It's not a Lutheran show, not a Methodist show, a Baptist show, a yada, yada, yada show. It's Christian overall umbrella, because there are, I lost track of the number of different flavors of Bible there are out there. Jesus didn't do that. God didn't command it. We as humans did that and screwed things up in the process. So, what can all of these 100 different version Bible readers come together and agree on are what Jesus said, and let's focus on those things and apply them to our modern politics.
Fascinating. And I certainly understand that. And by the way, if you swing through Houston, I think you'll pick up another 40 or 50 different religions. I have seen some that pop up and they'll have a sign. And of course, some of them are pretty big. We're home to some pretty large operations here. Thousands of people show up every weekend to hang out with some of these cats.
Yeah, I thought I saw something the other day on Google about the David Schein cult.
Well, they haven't checked in with me yet. As long as there's a royalty associated with it, I'll be glad to discuss it with them.
I go into that on my show and in my Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You book.
And that is our next question so your current book out is called Terror Strikes Coming Soon to a City Near You. That's actually the whole title. It's not Terror Strikes. And by the way, the book's coming soon. So how'd you come up with that title, and what is the book about? Why should our audience read it?
Well, as I was going to say, even in a book about terrorism, although I'll go into it's not entirely really about terrorism, much more than that, there's a comic relief chapter, right? We have got to keep our sense of humor. And though, yes, it's Terror Strikes, there's a bazillion books called Terror Strikes. The subtitle makes all the difference. Coming soon to a city near you. And yes, I mean that. Terrorism isn't just a New York 9/11 thing. It can happen anytime, any place. Like LAX was shut down by a terror attack on an electrical grid substation. Shut down LAX for 3 days. There was a train derailed between St. Louis and Chicago. Terrorism. It can happen anytime, any place. But I'm not trying to sell you on fear porn. I just want you awake and alert, not paranoid, right? But I like to say about the book, yes, about terrorism, but not book about death, but life and living. Life over death, hope over fear, faith over despair, love over hate, good over evil, individualism over collectivism, political aspect of the book, freedom over tyranny, family and friends. So it's way more than terrorism. And if you like baseball, there's some baseball in there too. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So, the terrorism is the thread that ties the historical fiction, #1 Amazon bestseller, together. I also call it faction. Historical fiction's the legal proper literature term, but I like to make up my own terms. I call it faction, part fact, part fiction.
It sounds fascinating. Is this set? Has this been triggered because you released it, I think, in 2022? Is this based on a lot of the reports that we're hearing? It seems over the last 2 years, which has been since your book was written, talking about all of the gotaways at the southern border and some at the northern border, that there's, Christopher Wray, the current FBI director, is saying we are in more danger now than we were when 9/11 happened.
Hence, coming soon to a city near you. It may not make Newsmax, OAN, Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, because it's a localized event and it doesn't get the national news. That doesn't mean terrorism hasn't happened. And it may have happened in your backyard, just everybody else hasn't heard of it. And indeed, yes. And in the book, I go into the very distinction between legal immigration and illegal immigration, the dangers of the latter, and we are a nation of the former.
Now, did you think a lot about the title of your book and the content of your book when the CrowdStrike problem happened about a week ago, and all those places in Europe and the airlines were fouled up, and all sorts of weird things happened? And you notice how quickly they rushed out there and said, "Oh, it's not a terrorist attack. It's not a service denial attack. We just fouled up." And I don't know about you, but I'm still having trouble buying that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of these things are underlying terrorist attacks, but indeed, they won't own up and admit to it. It's, oh, just human error or this or that or the other. It's like the LAX outage that I spoke of. 3 days it was out. They still will not, to this day, talk about it again because it was a substation attack. It was a not a forewarning, but kind of a I'm having a mental block here, but a minor excursion, a test. If we do this, can we get away with it? And then, well, that worked. Now, how do we upscale that? Minor things can lead to bigger things if we don't deal in the reality of what that actually was.
Well, I think, and certainly following on that point, the World Trade Center was attacked before, and and the cats that were involved in that, it really didn't seem that anybody got that excited about it. But sadly, I think it was about 8 years later when 9/11 happened, and people found out that you can go after the same building twice.
Yeah, they thought they could topple the World Trade Center with a U-Haul bomb, but the place they misplaced where they put the U-Haul truck bomb, and it didn't fully explode to the degree they thought it would. They thought they could undermine the stability from below. And since that didn't work, they thought, okay, well, let's attack it from above. So, right, it can happen the same place twice, or it may never happen the same place twice ever. You don't know. But the point being, 9/11 was a big deal, a big ordeal. And terrorists, despite wanting to claim they're martyrs for God, do want to actually live. They find suckers to suicide themselves by plane into the Trade Center, but the plotters live. You notice that? They want to live. And since we went in full force into Afghanistan, they think, oh, well, wait a minute. We don't want to do anything that scale again and poke the eye of the beast and get that response, because we'll be killed then, right? So a death by 1,000 cuts, right? You poke here, poke there, poke, 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 poke. The tiger might not strike full force because, again, despite all their rhetoric about, soldiers for Allah and willing to martyr themselves, no, they want to live too. They want us to die. They want to live.
And Joe, you may have missed it in the very recent news, but the 3 folks that they found that been under arrest for a while, who reportedly were the mastermind of 9/11, have just agreed to be our house guests at Gitmo for the rest of their lives. I'm disappointed in that. I think the death penalty would have made more sense, especially one of the concerns I have is when they hold these terrorists like this, it gives the other terrorists who are their buddies and their fans an incentive to create some type of a ransom thing where they say, oh, well, we've caught this U.S. senator wandering around the world, and we'll trade him for the big mastermind and stuff like that. So
Right.
I'm not impressed with the fact that they made a settlement, and but that I don't know if you saw that, but it literally just came in today.
Yeah, I
announced
saw
by
it.
the Biden administration, and
is
there's
it-
just no justice.
Does it surprise anyone? An administration that is weak on criminals in our own land is also weak on terrorists. An administration, Biden, who was VP during Obama, as I call him, and the Iran deal, sending money, supporting terrorists. Biden, who also lifted all the sanctions, put a couple on here and there to pretend he's tough, but he made Iran rich. What's going on in Israel now and in the Middle East would not have happened if not for Biden lifting 90% of all the sanctions. So they are awash in oil money again. They were almost dirt poor, bankrupt, couldn't fund the terrorism, but now they're awash in oil cash again, and they're able to fund these proxy terrorist groups. So a lot of this wouldn't be happening. So they're willing, in my mind, openly, my opinion, aiding and abetting the enemy, Iran, the biggest state sponsor of terrorism on the entire planet. So of course, it's not a surprise they make a deal with terrorists.
Absolutely. Well, Joseph M. Leonard, it's been a great pleasure to visit with you again. As some of our audience know, I was the guest on your show, and we could do this for a whole hour or two. But what my producer tells me is if we keep it short, people are more likely to listen to the whole thing. But tell our audience how they can get some more information about you.
Yeah, well, first, now this may air soon, and hopefully it'll air some other time on a replay at some point. So the show with you on Constitutionalist Politics right now is penciled in for the last Wednesday of August 2024. So it will air then, and hopefully people will hear it when it airs, or if this airs again after that, they'll find the backdated episode. But to find me, you could see, if you see this on video, terrorstrikes.info at the top of my screen. That's the book-related site. I also have the author site, josephmleonard.us. Again, it looks like Leonard. It's actually Polish. It's Leonard without an O, josephmleonard.us. And for those who care, I'm part Italian and German on my mother's side too, but majority Polish. And and please go ahead, make Polak jokes. I'm more than happy with them because, if we can't laugh at ourselves, we have no business laughing at others. And
I totally agree. I think that's too much. Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.